Hi there, and welcome back to the Science House Express chat. I'm Danielle Parker, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Mountain Satellite Office of the Science House. I am very excited to be chatting with Jeff Chandler today, Director of NCSU's Mountain Horticulture Research Station and Extension Center in Mills River, North Carolina. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to get to chat with you, and we want to know all about agriculture.
Well, Danielle, I am so happy that you asked that we could do this and talk a little bit about some of our research and extension programs and how that relates to agriculture in North Carolina and how our mission benefits agriculture in the state. So I'm very happy that you called me to talk about this today. This is going to be exciting.
I'm excited as well. Well, let's dive right in with our first question.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you interested or drew you into the field of agriculture.
Well, I grew up on a family farm in the Piedmont area of North Carolina in Montgomery County is where I grew up, and myself and one older brother and family farm there where we grew row crops like corn, cotton, soybeans, wheat, had beef cattle. So that's the environment I grew up in and doing that. And then by the time I finished high school and my brother and I went on to college, we were transitioning out of actively farming at that time. That's where I began my passion for agriculture is growing up in a family farm operation. And when I went to college, one of my goals was to be able to benefit agriculture and work in agriculture was my main goal to be able to do that. And I started out working within extension as a county extension agent with our NC State Extension and did that for several years and then transitioned into research stations and now working at the third research station site in North Carolina in my career. So I've been very fortunate to have been able to have touched a broad array of agriculture across North Carolina and a lot of different commodities and programs throughout my career.
Wow, that's wonderful. Growing up on a farm just sounds like a dream to me.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what drives your passion for sharing about agriculture with the community?
Well, again, Danielle, I think for me personally, it's about trying to improve agriculture and maintain agriculture as a strong industry. The largest industry in North Carolina is agriculture, and doing what we can do to maintain the strength of that and through community support as farm dynamics continue to change, our state population dynamics continuing to change, and sometimes those are opposing forces at work. A lot of small farms in the state that are new or more developing more small farms in the state, but then larger farms are getting larger but less in number. So fewer large farms and many more small farms. So the middle-sized type of an operation like I grew up on are the ones that are not as prevalent anymore. And I think it's sometimes difficult to maintain continuity between our community and agriculture because of that, because not everybody is involved directly in production agriculture. Not as many people have their hands involved in it as they once did. So for me personally, one thing that I really get excited about and I take a lot of pride in is engaging our local community here in Mills River and around Western North Carolina in the work that we're doing to benefit agriculture and how it benefits everybody in terms of our food supply, landscape plants, et cetera.
That's really interesting. I didn't realize about the small farms versus the larger farms and how that dynamic is changing, which actually I think touches a little bit or goes into a little bit on my next question, which is why is agriculture science so important to society?
Well, Commissioner of Agriculture Steve Troxler, I've heard him make this comment several times in speeches he's done over the years and talking about world population growth and the need for food production to continue to increase around the world. And what Commissioner Troxler has said on multiple occasions is that if you look at areas of conflict around the globe,
Mhm.
it's usually where we also have hunger issues. And there's civil unrest in places where, more times than not, hot spots of civil unrest around the world are also places that have underserved food needs and have nourishment problems with the population in that part of the world. But what Commissioner Troxler said was, hungry people are angry people. And I think that's one of our really broad benefits that we're looking at from a very broad perspective, is trying to feed the world's population, a world population that's approaching 9 billion people. And the growth and development of food in order to feed those people around the world is, on a macro sense, what I get very excited about and I'm very engaged in. And I feel very urgent about, Danielle, the urgency that we must have in order to have a sustainable food supply to feed 9 billion people here within a few decades is a pretty incredible challenge. It's a challenge I know that we are up to, the farmers of America, the farmers of North Carolina, and great institutions like NC State and other land grant universities around the country all working on this problem. It's a tremendous challenge, but I think that it's a challenge we're up to. But that's my focus, and that's the real driving force that gets me going in the morning.
Yeah, that's something I think a lot of people don't think about in terms of the human population growing, is that we're going to have to feed all of those people as well. And so that is, I can see being a huge challenge. Um,
Sure.
and that does again lead me into my next question, which is, what are some of the research studies that are happening at the Mountain Horticulture Crops Research and Extension Center, and again, why are they important?
Well, I just give you a sort of an overview of some of the work that's going on here in Mills River. So at the Mountain Horticulture Research and Extension Center, where we are housed here in Mills River, we are one of 18 sites across North Carolina that conducts field research to benefit agriculture. And we support the field research efforts of faculty, primarily in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. But as you know, Danielle, the center here is home to colleagues and faculty and professional staff in the College of Ag and Life Sciences, as well as the College of Natural Resources and the College of Sciences at NC State. But to talk a little bit about our field research program that we do here, our work at this site is focused around apples, ornamentals, and tomatoes. Those are very relevant commodities to the agricultural economy in this part of the state. We're located in Henderson County. Henderson County produces about 75% of North Carolina's apple crop. So it's a very fitting area for us to be doing a lot of apple research. One example of a research project that has tremendous benefit and immediate need to the apple growers of the area is with a very unique problem that's been classified or named a rapid apple decline, for lack of a better description for this phenomenon. But basically, it's young trees that are succumbing to feeding of an ambrosia beetle pest. And it's something that the pest, the beetle feeding itself is not what is killing the trees, but it's the introduction of an opportunistic fungus with the beetles that winds up killing the trees. So we're seeing growers investing 10, 15, $20,000 an acre to establish new apple orchards, and within 2 or 3 years losing 3/4 of their trees.
Oh, wow.
This has been attacking young trees in particular. So this is a relatively new problem. And so we've diverted a lot of research focus and effort, and there's 2 faculty here, graduate students, postdocs, a lot of staff and energy directed toward addressing this problem. And we're making some headway on that, and working with containerized trees. How can we mimic the effects of the ambrosia beetle feeding to try to prevent that? And so that's a very applied type of research project that we're doing here as one example.
Wow, that's fascinating. Is the beetle and or the fungus itself, is it invasive? Did it come from out of the country?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. Are there other parasites or pests that affect apple trees?
Well,
Similar?
there's so brown marmorated stink bug that most everyone is now familiar with is a very common pest now that was introduced from overseas quite a few years ago now, but is a very significant economic pest in tree fruit like apples and peaches, but also in our vegetables and tomatoes and squash and peppers and those types of commodities as well. So a large part of the entomology research project housed here is to deal with management strategies that deal with brown marmorated stink bug control in tree fruit as well as vegetables.
Oh wow, I had no idea that stink bugs were a pest to fruit trees. That's really interesting.
Yep.
I
Yep.
definitely have those all over my house, and it's
So
they're pretty
feeding
frustrating.
on fruit, yeah, sure is.
Huh, interesting. And I'm going to put a plug in here now for Hendersonville apples come the fall for any of our listeners. If you
Absolutely.
haven't come to Hendersonville to try the apples in the fall, please do so because that's one of my favorite times of the year just for the apples around here. So it's pretty awesome. Great. I think you've already really touched on the next question, which are some of the biggest challenges that agriculture faces for the future of our society. So you mentioned population growth. What are some other challenges that you see agriculture facing in the future?
Well, Danielle, one of the greatest challenges that I see that we're going to have to deal with in the near future is labor in agriculture. You know, it's a hot topic, sometimes controversial topic about how we provide adequate labor in agriculture, particularly in horticultural crops like we work with mostly here that require a lot of hand labor.
Mhm.
Whether it's picking apples or whether it's planting tomatoes, a lot of these horticultural crops are very labor intensive, and having a dependable, affordable, safe workforce is crucial to being able to supply that food product to to our population. Just as we've experienced during the COVID-19 crisis, disruptions in food supply and distribution can have, you know, very rapid impacts on the population at large. And one thing that's I think greatly concerning is making sure we've got a dependable, safe, affordable workforce available to manage and grow these crops, and particularly with the horticultural crops requiring a lot of hand labor. That's a big concern. One field research project that we're doing to try to address some of that need is with the tomato breeding program here, is working with, matter of fact, we just planted this morning some tomatoes for a compact growth habit tomatoes. So otherwise known as CGH tomatoes, but compact growth habit tomatoes that are bred to be short, bushier plants than our traditional fresh market tomatoes, but they don't require staking or stringing. So that eliminates a tremendous amount of labor in field production to not have to stake or string those plants and then remove that material in the fall. So it's a tremendous potential for labor savings through a project like that. Compact growth habit tomato plants are not a new thing necessarily, but they hadn't yielded well and the disease resistance was not very good at all. So our tomato breeding program here at NC State in Mills River is breeding compact growth habit tomatoes that yield well. So they have an economic profitability for the farmer if they yield high enough. And they also have good disease resistance. So we're not depending on as many pesticides and fungicides to control disease problems in those tomatoes. So that's a double positive impact of those plants, and it reduces the amount of labor that will be required in the field. So that's another research project I can highlight that is having an effect on, at least we think it will have an effect on, once we improve the yield and the disease resistance in these plants, on labor availability in agriculture. So in addition to developing better tomatoes, I think we as a research community are always looking for ways that we can improve the system.
Mhm.
Agriculture as a system of technology that can be applied to improve that whole process from field to fork.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And again, another aspect that I hadn't considered in
Mhm.
agriculture. And I love that you guys are using kind of an old strategy, but for a new challenge to try to solve
Yeah.
a new challenge, which is really, really great. Um, so, what advice do you have for people who want to enter the field of agriculture? It sounds like you guys have a lot of challenges, and it's a lot of having to brainstorm and strategize how to meet those challenges. Maybe even some challenges that you're not aware of yet. So,
Right.
what kind of advice would you give somebody that would want to go into the field of agriculture, knowing
The first thing I would say to people interested in agriculture is you do not have to come from a farm background to work in agriculture as a professional career. Um, that is not a prerequisite to what we do. People think that if you didn't grow up on a farm or you're not accustomed to doing that, then that's something that wouldn't fit for you. That is not true at all. Most of the people that I interact with here, they didn't grow up on a farm environment like in the way that I did, but they got into agriculture either through FFA, they got into it through their college degree program, got interested in that. Some of them just got interested in it because they developed more of an interest in wanting to know where their food came from, and that led them down that path. One thing I would say to everybody is that agriculture needs bright young people that want to go into this field, that want to adapt technology and apply very detailed data sets to what we're doing in agriculture. It is far more than driving tractors and planting crops. It's a lot of data today in agriculture. It's a lot of technology being used and applied in agriculture. It's a very scientific field, and there's tremendous training available through institutions like NC State. We'll plug the university here. There's a great College of Agriculture and Life Sciences to get an education in that field. Nationwide, the estimate is that we're only supplying about 35% of the graduates needed for crop science, for instance, coming out of college, that are needed in a particular field. So the rest of those jobs in the country are being filled by business majors or some other degree field. They're not coming out of an agriculture degree field. So my point, Danielle, is there is tremendous opportunity from an educational standpoint to get a degree in agriculture and get good job placement in technological fields to benefit agriculture.
that's great. And I love that you said you don't have to grow up on a farm necessarily to
Absolutely
go
not.
into this
Mm-mm.
field. Yeah. And I for sure can give a plug to FFA. Working in Madison County, I worked very closely with the FFA teachers there. And we had some wonderful students. If students are interested in this in the high school, middle school or high school level, getting involved in FFA as a foot in the door is a really great program, and that will definitely give some great experience. So I'm glad you
Absolutely.
mentioned that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this is my last question, and this is more of just a fun question. What's the coolest thing about your work and what you get to do?
You know, okay, I'll answer that in two parts, Danielle. The first part being I get really excited about the discovery of knowledge process. I
Mhm.
mean, we're discovering new things every day. How exciting is it to know when I go home at night, we've learned something today that we didn't know yesterday? And I'm talking about we as an agricultural industry, the research process yields for us, we're learning things we didn't know yesterday. We're creating knowledge, and then that knowledge is then being shared with farmers throughout the community across the state, and being sharing that information through extension as part of our university land grant mission. So that's one thing that I think is just so cool, is that we're learning how to do things and then sharing that information with others and seeing that happen. And obviously the other thing that's really cool that I get to do is drive farm equipment and operate tractors and combines and machinery like that. That's always a lot of fun for me. So going back to my roots growing up, you can't get away from that.
That's awesome. That's great. That does sound like a lot of fun. And
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned the learning new things. I think that that just brings it to what the heart of being a scientist is. And that is learning new things and discovering new things and then
Hmm.
being able to share that with the
Sure.
community. So that's wonderful. Well, thank you so very much for joining me today. This was a great talk. I learned a lot, and I appreciate that. And I definitely have a new, not that I didn't have respect for agriculture before, but I definitely have a new respect for it in terms of how you guys tackle a lot of the challenges that is facing agriculture right now. So I really appreciate that. And I hope you all enjoyed our chat with Jeff Chandler as well. Join us next week when the Science House Express explores optics. Of course, Monday we will have some resources for you to explore explore. And on Wednesday, we will be at our do our at-home experiment with optics. And then finally, join us Friday when Dr. Pamela Gilchrist of MOTEP and Kyron Anderson Academy's director will be interviewing a scientist in the field of optics. So that's really exciting. You definitely want to tune in for that one. Until next time, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel down below. Additional information can be found in the description box. And thank you for watching our Science House Express chat. See you next week.